Good morning, everybody. This is Laura Peterson, your host of Central Florida Real Estate Radio. I'm from Your Home Sold, Guaranteed Realty, and to discuss the sale of your home, you can call or text 407-566-2555. That's 407-566-2555. So I've got lots of great stuff to talk about today. There's things that are happening in the news, and we'll talk about how that actually affects you. We always start with the stats, and so I'm going to jump right to them in regards to what happened last week, so we can kind of keep a pulse in the market in regards to what's going on and what's happening and all of that kind of good stuff. So basically, the single-family homes went to 337 last week, up from 284 the week before. As if you've listened to the show a lot, you know that in January that's one of the lowest months of the year for sales. And it's all because, we're in a lag time, obviously. And so the properties that went under contract in December, right before the holidays, are the ones that are closing now. People are busy with other things and other activities, and so housing kind of goes on the back burner. The other month that's a little bit slow is September, and that's because all the kids go back to school in August, and so everybody's getting used to the new routines, and everything that's going on with that, and so the month of September is low as well. But other than that, we're pretty straight across the board in regards to what's happening in, Central Florida here in regards to the houses. And so even in a slow month, 337 houses sold last week. The median price went down a little bit to $413,500. So basically, that's not any reason for concern for me. We've hovered kind of in this range, and we go back and forth and everything like that in regards to what it is. If you listened last week, then you would know year over year that the median price has not changed year over year in regards to what's going on in Central Florida. The average price went up about 3%, but the median price stayed about the same. Now, I always look at the median because it's kind of right there in the middle, so you get an idea. So at $413,500 in regards to the median price, then then you would look at, how that shakes down and everything like that. So if a house is under $250,000, you would think probably it needs some work, maybe not in the best area or something like that. And that's absolutely true. Maybe it's a little bit smaller, but small doesn't necessarily always equate to a price, because if you're in a great neighborhood, basically, what everybody considers great. I'm not saying one neighborhood's greater than another, but what people consider great, then if you're looking at that, then you're going to see that basically the bottom line is, in regards to what's going on in that neighborhood, is that the smaller houses are the entry level. So the price per square foot on a smaller house is actually going to be more many times than it is in a bigger house in that entry level thing, because you still have to have, all of the exterior and the land and all of that kind of stuff. Usually they all have at least 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms. So you've got the kitchen, you've got the 2 bathrooms, you've got all of that stuff going on. And so the price of that house isn't necessarily a lot lower, even though the square footage or the footprint necessarily might be. So when we're looking at under 250, which again, the median price is $413,500, there were 34 of them that sold last week. There were 34 as well that sold between 250 and 300. Then we had 91 between 300 and 400, and we had 68 between 400 and 500. We had 91 between 500 and a million, and then we had 19 over a million that sold. And that's what made up our 337 that sold. Now, there actually were 3 bank-owned properties that sold last week. 2 of them were under 250, and one of them was between 400 and 500. So that's kind of what the scoop is on that. The inventory actually this week went up by 106, and so we're sitting at 8109. So because the month of January is low, it's going to show that we're still in a balanced market, because that's considered between 4 and 6. So if you're a buyer or seller, equal opportunity kind of out there. But we're at 5.55 this week because the number is a little bit lower than it will be in February and the rest of the year, for example. So under 250, there's 4.22 months of inventory, 3.6 between 250 and 300, and then we're at 4.32 between 300 and 400, 5.6 between 400 and 500. We go to 7 months of inventory between 500 and a million, and over a million is at 9.9, excuse me. So basically, the bottom line is that there is a little bit more inventory on the higher end when it comes to single family homes here in Central Florida. So you'll find that there's a little bit more room in regards to basically the list to sale price ratio. So this week we are at an all-time low from the list to sale price ratio, which is at 90.12 overall. Now, the interesting thing to me, so, that's the kind of stats that would come out on the news. Oh, wow, the list to ask price ratio is way down of 92.2. So basically what we always look at is what's going on the lower end and the higher end, and then the middle is usually a lot closer. And that's exactly true again this week, that, the middle ones are all at 98%, but under 250, they sold at 89.96, and over a million sold at 79.59. So actually, I should really dig into that and see what happened, to see what was going on with all the houses that were out there. Over a million. There were 19 of them that sold, and basically the average price of them were 2.28, and the median price was 1.67. And so obviously one of them took a really, really big cut, if not a couple of them. And so that brought it down to 79% of asking is basically what happened on that. So that's pretty unusual. Usually it's, in the 90s, like 92, 93 and everything. But with that going on right there in the over a million and the under 250, with that alone, that brought down our overall average to 92, which has been sitting at 96. So you've got to kind of take these week by week stats with a grain of salt, because they're not the be all and the end all, but they definitely are out there to give us an idea, and we watch trends to see what's going on and all of that kind of good stuff. So that's basically what the bottom line is on that. Now, when you're looking at condos, townhomes, and villas, and I'm always talking about that you've got to look at a specific neighborhood, a specific school district, a specific zip code, to get those comparables, to really see what's going on. And and really zoning in on that is going to determine whether you get a good price or whether you get just kind of an average price. I'm working with a couple right now, and we're looking at houses in Winter Garden. And when we're looking at them, the neighborhoods are very different in regards to what we're looking at. And so this one particular house that we were looking at, basically it's in a really great neighborhood and everything like that. Everything's really good. It's priced really well for the neighborhood. And it's, I was thinking it was built in 2013. It's got a pool. It's on over a quarter of an acre of lot. It's in a very quiet neighborhood, but in a neighborhood that they actually cut your grass and those kinds of things. It's got really nice amenities that they're excited about, because they have kind of, getting to the age where they're adult children. They're not quite yet, but they've got fitness centers, and then they've got community pools as well as their own pool for the house, like I think I mentioned, and everything like that. But the interesting thing to me is I was looking at the comps within a mile, because that's something that an appraiser will look at. And if you go outside of that community, like the house that is exactly the same size as this particular house is going for 400,000 more. And I was like, wow, that's a big difference in regards to something that is just, and they're literally a half a mile away. It's just in a different neighborhood in Winter Garden, and it's in that, corridor, the Hamlin corridor, and all of that kind of good stuff. But it was very interesting to me to see that and to look at it. And so I said, if you're a smart person, you're not going to look at that other neighborhood and compare it to this price. You're going to look at that neighborhood that it's in, which is what we absolutely did in order to determine the value. But in order to get in touch with us, you can call or text 407-566-2555. You can find us online at centralfloridarealestateradio.com, and we will see you after the break. Welcome back, everybody. I'm Laura Peterson. I'm your host of Central Florida Real Estate Radio. I'm from Your Home Sold, Guaranteed Realty, and to discuss the sale of your home, you can call or text 407-566-2555. That's 407-566-2555. So looking at the rest of the stats here, the condos, townhomes, and villas for the week, and basically there were 89 of those that sold, which is up from 66 the week before, which was when there were a lot of holidays, believe it or not. And basically, so 267 versus 413.5 for a single family home. So there's quite a difference when it comes to the condos in regards to, what's going on. Maybe they might be smaller square footage overall and all of that kind of good stuff. But when you're looking at it, it's always good to know in regards to seeing what's going on. And their inventory also increased by 44. January is a good time when a lot of people put their houses on the market. So again, not a big surprise. But when we break down what actually happened in the condo market last week, of those 89, 37 of them were under 250. So that's a big difference. 14 were 250 to 300, 18 were 300 to 400, 11 were 400 to 500. There were 9 that were between 500 and $1 million, and none of them sold over $1 million, but there are 24 of them on the market. So there are definitely properties on the market over there. So obviously that's going to lower the price because nothing over $1 million sold. Basically, when you're looking at the inventory here, we're in a completely different place than we are in the single family homes. And so it's 10.68 months of inventory, basically is what's going on here in the condo market. So that is definitely a buyer's market. And so I tell condo owners all the time, it's like you definitely have to do things to stand out, to make things different. And every category has 10 months or more, except for the 500 to $1 million this week, that 9 of them sold. And there's 269 on the market. So that gives us 7 months of inventory. But, 10 months, 13 months, kind of across the board in regards to what's going on. And so basically, that's a different animal in regards to how you have to market your house. So that's why I think the stats are so important to look at, to kind of get the trends, to see what's going on. But if you are looking at buying or selling, to know what's going on with the condo market and everything in regards to that. So the interesting thing, I talked that the list to sale price ratio was 92% this week on the single family homes, and usually it's at 98. There was some stuff that happened or something happened. One particular house, I'm not sure, over $1 million last week. I didn't look at the specific properties that sold, but the condo market is at 98.58, which it's usually about the same as what the single family homes are, but it's beating it this week, which is really interesting because there's so much more inventory. But under 250, they're at 94.39. It was at 92 and change on the single family homes, and then we're at 98 pretty much all the way across. Obviously, we would have to be in order for that to come out with that ratio. So the average days on the market for a condo right now is 106 before you get a contract. And when you're looking at the single family homes, they're at 76. So you can see right there that inventory impacts that quite a bit, obviously, but you do have to be aggressive about it. One of the worst things that I think is out there for people, for sellers and people looking at houses that they consider, which to me is immaterial, but it's something that everybody considers, is the days on the market. And you might think, well, I think that's a really good thing, and that's okay. It's like I think that it just kind of gives a black eye sometimes to houses that don't need a black eye, and they go, I wonder what happened. Well, there's situations, and I've worked with different sellers and that kind of stuff, where we've had this situation where the property is very difficult to sell. I mean, not to sell, to show. Basically, it might be in a short-term rental community. For example, I've got a property right now that I've got 3 offers on that we're negotiating, 3 offers. And so you would think, wow, that's pretty amazing and everything like that. The property was only available this month, 2 days to show. 2, that's it. It had a renter in from, before the beginning of the year to, they moved out on Tuesday, and then we had somebody else moving in on Thursday. So it was available from when they moved out on Tuesday, so when they moved in on Thursday. So you could see it all day Wednesday, you could see it in the afternoon on Tuesday and the morning on Thursday. And then it's occupied with a tenant until the end of the month. So if someone's here on vacation and they're renting a home like that, they do not want to be interrupted by showings, and they have a right to do that. So if you're in a short-term rental community, then you're going to have a tough time showing it when it's occupied. And the goal of that short-term rental Airbnb type property is that obviously you've got it rented. And so it's kind of a catch-22, for the owner. Do you want to have it available for showings, or do you want to have it so that you can have people see it? And a lot of people that want to buy those short-term rental homes are only here for a short period of time. Maybe they're here for vacation for a couple of weeks. Maybe they're here for, for something, who knows what. But basically, when it comes down to it, they want to make sure that they've got everything all lined out and everything to, that they're not interrupted. They're on vacation. It's like if you were in a hotel room, you wouldn't expect that you'd expect the maid to come in and clean, but not a bunch of strangers coming in looking at the houses and all of that kind of stuff. And you're like, oh my gosh, I didn't, make my bed or whatever. And so basically, when it comes down to it, you've got that kind of situation. And then you run into situations where people work nights. And so as a result of that, they're day sleepers and that kind of stuff. And so, there are different times where the property is unavailable to show. And so you run into all kinds of situations where it's not 100% accessible all the time. So that's one reason I don't like days on the market, for those kinds of circumstances. But when you look at it, for the most part and everything, and I know that there are a few times where they show like a car might have been on the market for X amount of days or something like that if it's a used car. But because I have seen that, but it's not the kind of thing that people usually pay attention to. And when it comes to a house, maybe that house was just waiting for you to come along and to find it, instead of, they've that there's something wrong with the house. I mean, that's where everybody goes, oh, there's something wrong with it. And there's usually nothing wrong with it. You're going to do your inspections and all of that kind of stuff to see, but it could be a diamond in the rough. It could be that somebody put really bad pictures up there of it. And as a result of that, it's just not going to sell. There's a lady that I know that lives in a mobile home community that pays lot rent. It's in Orlando, and she's trying to sell it, and it's about $60,000. It's a double wide. It's 2 bedrooms, 2 baths. The bathrooms have been redone. Everything's very nice and everything about it. And I don't sell those because it's not a property that that has real estate attached to it. It's basically like selling a car. So anyway, she was telling me, and I was trying to help her find some people that could actually do it, and serve her and that kind of thing, which is what I did. But basically, the bottom line is that she worked with this one lady that she found on her own, and they took pictures on their phone. Well, sorry, it's not going to look the way it needs to look in order to make things happen. And, so she didn't get anywhere. And then she said that, this new guy that she got, he had a professional photographer come in, and the pictures are beautiful, and the property is shown in the right light, and the right lighting and all of that kind of stuff are things that you're going to have to compete with in the marketplace. So you need to make sure that if you're a seller, you're putting your best foot forward, and days on the market could be affected by that and many other things. But I'll continue with this after after the break. But in order to get in touch with us, you can call or text 407-566-2555. You can find us online at centralfloridarealestateradio.com, and we will see you after the break. Welcome back, everybody. This is Laura Peterson, your host of Central Florida Real Estate Radio. I'm from Your Home Sold, Guaranteed Realty. And to discuss the sale of your home, you can call or text 407-566-2555. That's 407-566-2555. So I was talking, earlier about the days on the market and kind of my pet peeve on that when people are looking at that. And my opinion is you can offer whatever you want to as a buyer on any house that you want to, because it's all going to come down to whether the seller's going to accept that price or they're not. And, you're never going to know until you try. Now, sometimes it might tick off the seller if you're too low, and they might say, I don't care what happens, I'm going to wait for another offer, and that kind of stuff, which might be, my opinion is it's just an offer, and it's not personal, although it feels personal. And so I think that you have to look at it as a business opportunity in regards to what would you do at your job. If somebody came in and said they wanted to give you less money for the thing that you had on the shelf, you'd have to decide, okay, well, I really want to sell it now, or I'm going to wait for somebody else to come along and pay more money for it. And maybe it's going to happen and maybe it's not. And especially with the condos, with having over 10 months of inventory, basically, you have to stand out and look at it. And so if there's 10 months of inventory, then theoretically you could be sitting there 9 months and your house wouldn't sell, and maybe even longer than that, because you might not have had it priced properly or gotten people in it because the pictures were bad and all of that kind of stuff, like I said earlier. So I think that it really comes down to that people need to look at the property for what they would be willing to pay for it, and that's it. Is what it comes down to. And sometimes when the pictures are really bad, those are the kinds of houses that you need to look at, because those don't have anybody else looking at it. So you're going to get a really good deal on it. And those are the ones that you're going to get the best deals on. So I don't ever look at the pictures to determine whether I'm going to, show somebody a house. Just a pro tip here. I've been doing this for 20 plus years. And basically, what I do is I look at the neighborhood, I look at what they're looking for, and I choose houses based on that, because I don't ever feel, like sometimes the pictures look a lot better. Sometimes the pictures don't look as good. Last week I was showing a house to some people, and they really, really thought it was going to be the house that they wanted. They just thought the be all and the end all, it was going to be it. And so I said, sure, we'll go look at it. Well, when I was talking to the realtor setting up the appointment, basically, he said, well, my biggest complaint that I've got is that the pictures look too good. And sure enough, when they got in there, they were like, oh, the pictures look a lot better than the house does. And so it's a balance, right? Because they went to see the house because of the pictures, but then when they got there, it wasn't what they expected, and it was too far away from what they expected that they didn't want to move forward with it. So it's kind of a delicate balance when it comes to that, in making sure that your house looks absolutely great, but it can't look so different that people get there and go, oh, wow, this doesn't look like the same house and I'm not going to make an offer on it, because that isn't what you want to have happen either. So like I said, it's just a delicate balance to make sure that you're getting what you want, as a seller, that you're putting your best foot forward, but you're not putting it forward so far that they go, oh, wow, this isn't even the same house. So you need to definitely look at that and see, basically, it's kind of a delicate dance, is basically the way that you want to look at it. So I wanted to also talk about a little bit in regards to the things that are going on to potentially later this year make homes more affordable, and how that's all going to shake out. And so you definitely know, as a buyer or seller, kind of what's going on, because affordability is an issue, and it has been in Central Florida for several years. Basically, the way that they gauge affordability is the amount of money that people make, and then you do have, if you're getting a loan, which most people do, that you have ratios that are regulated by the government just to protect you, to make sure that you're not, house heavy and you can't do anything else. So basically, when it comes down to it, the way that they want to look at it, just for an overall figure, is that all of your debts together, including your house and any payments that you need to make on student loans, any payments that you need to make on credit cards, cars, all that kind of stuff added together, doesn't add up to more than 50% of your gross pay. So first of all, gross versus net, you've got taxes and that kind of thing that come out of your paycheck. And so already that's going to reduce it. So basically what they want to make sure is that you've still got enough money to buy groceries. You've still got enough money to, put gas in your car and all of those kinds of things, that you are going to have other expenses, that you've got an ability to give, that you've got an ability to save. All of those kinds of things are things that, you're going to do that they're not considering when they're looking at what you're spending the money on. And so basically, that when it comes down to it, as a general rule, they want to make sure that all of your debts don't add up to more than 50% of your income. And that's kind of a good rule of thumb in regards to what we're looking at, considering, all of that kind of stuff. So basically, there was an executive order that was signed this week on January 20th, and it was to limit large investors' home purchases and outline plans to lower mortgage and credit card rates to expand home ownership. So I went ahead and I actually looked at that executive order to see what it was, and it was more, the one that I looked at was the one that limits the huge investors from buying single family homes and renting them out. It doesn't say anything in there in regards to the companies that come in and might buy the home from you, like a cash offer kind of thing, so that you can move on to the next thing that you want to do. And then they're going to resell it. So they're not sitting on those houses. They're just looking to get their small percentage out of it. And it's no different than if you're going to buy a car and you're buying it from a dealer that you can actually, turn in your old car to the dealer. You're not necessarily going to get quite as much as if you sold it on your own, but for the convenience and for knowing and the lack of hassle and all of that kind of stuff, you're going to turn your car into the dealer. They're going to give you a credit on the new car that you're buying, and you're not going to have to deal with switching over the license and all of that kind of stuff. So there are companies now that are coming in and giving cash offers on houses that are allowing you basically to trade in your house for another one, is basically what it comes down to. So there's a huge need for that, in my opinion, in the market. And I think that we're heading, more that way, but it gives sellers choices. And our cash offer program actually has, that we've got 70 investors and that kind of thing on there. So there's all kinds of opportunities for sellers to basically do what they want to do and not have to wait necessarily for the market. But I'm going to definitely go into what's going on with this executive order and how it affects you, in my opinion, and everything. And so we'll just be back with that at after this break. And in order to get in touch with us, you can call or text 407-566-2555. You can find us online at centralfloridarealestateradio.com, and we will see you after the break. Welcome back, everybody. This is Laura Peterson, your host of Central Florida Real Estate Radio. I'm from Your Home Sold, Guaranteed Realty, and to discuss the sale of your home, you can call or text 407-566-2555. That's 407-566-2555. So I was basically, talking about the executive order that was signed on January 20th that basically, is trying to get affordability up. So I was starting to explain, and I'm not sure if I finished, that affordability comes into that you can, that the average person in the area with the average wage that they're making, that they can afford the median price of a single family home. That's what they consider if homes are affordable or not. And so that would mean that 50% of your income would go towards all of your debt, including your cars, your house, credit cards, school loans, all that kind of stuff. So that's where, when they're talking about an affordability index, and if people can afford in that area, that's what they're basically looking at. Okay. So basically, the White House is trying to get Wall Street from competing with Main Street home buyers. Now, when the market tanked, and it probably was not a bad thing at the time. Actually, I think it was great because, when the market started going down, it froze here at the end of 2005. And then it just started heading down. I mean, in 2005, though, so everyone knows, there was a huge increase in the prices in 2005. They were going up 5% per month. And so after they went up like 40-50% in that year, what happened is that the people that were buying those houses said, okay, we're going to stop right here. It's beyond our comfort zone in regards to what we think those houses are worth. So we're just going to stop, and we're not going to buy it anymore. And so the market kind of froze is basically what happened. And then it froze for a while. And of course, there's the people that going through lifestyle changes and stuff like that, that they, whether it's a death or whether they're having multiple kids. So they needed more space. I mean, there were still some houses being sold, but for the most part, it was frozen. And so there were a lot less houses being sold than there are right now. Then basically what happened is that the prices started falling, and they continued to fall. And they continued to fall. I mean, right now we're talking about that we have a normal market of, roughly about 5 months of inventory on houses. There were 25 months of inventory of houses on the market. So that's kind of where it was at. So the prices continued to fall, and they fell till 2010 is what happened. And then when the pendulum goes on a clock, it goes too far one way and then it goes too far the next way. If they went too high, 50% in a year, and then they went too low. They really did. I remember a house that was $35,000, brand new. It was foreclosed. Never been lived in. It was somebody who bought it from England. They got foreclosed on. Never been lived in. $35,000 for that house. It was a 3-bedroom, 2-bath. I was like, oh my gosh, this is absolutely insane. How low can it go? And so obviously that was kind of the bottom, which was in mid 2010. And then it was kind of, building itself back up to where it should have been. Now here we are, that was 2010, and here we are 16 years later in 2026. And basically the prices have gotten to where probably in about 22, I think, is where they kind of got to the point where they were about, back in 25, but they came up really slowly and it came up naturally and wages increased and all that kind of good stuff. So basically during that time period when the houses were going for 35,000, Wall Street was like, hey, this is like a really good deal. We can get, 1,000, 1,500, 2,000 for these houses that are only costing us 35,000 a month, in rent. So they came in and they bought a bunch of them. And there are several companies that did that. And so that's who this executive order is trying to eliminate from buying houses. Now, the bottom line is, in my opinion, is that in our market, for example, there was, because of that's what happened in Orlando. So because of that, and the houses were so low in 2010, that's when they came in and bought. When the houses kind of got up to where they were in 2022 and stuff like that, they're not buying anymore. I mean, it was all over articles and all that kind of stuff out there that they're not currently buying because they're looking for the return on investment that they get with the renters, but then they're also looking for the appreciation. And they thought it was going to flatline there for a little while, which it has. And so basically they haven't gone up, they haven't gone down. So they basically, kind of paused their purchasing. So they haven't been buying a lot in Orlando. Now, I'm sure that they're buying them in other areas in the country where they're having, huge increases and that kind of stuff in the pricing, and the rents are, going to make sense. So they're looking for those areas. But despite all of that, with them not buying a boatload of houses here, which they have in the past, and I don't know for sure how many it is, but I'm sure it's a few thousand that they own. And basically, I just looked at the last 30 days and I wanted to see what percentage of the houses that sell in our market sell for cash. And it comes out to 23%. Now, back in the day when we were in 2010, we were at 70% or so was cash. So I'd have buyers come to me and they're like, well, I'm paying cash, so I want to get like a huge difference. I'm like, well, cash is the market right now, so you're not going to get that. And still at 23%, you're not going to get a huge discount, but you might get some. So basically, when it comes down to it, that's kind of where we're at today in regards to that. So basically, when I read through this, executive order, and my understanding of it is that within the next 30 days, we're going to see everything kind of defined in regards to what's going on. And so basically, they don't want any sale of single family homes by the federal government within 60 days of this order to these big companies and that kind of stuff. So that would be foreclosed homes that are done that were, FHA or VA or USDA and that kind of stuff, because USDA has loans and that kind of stuff too. So it's not necessarily saying in here that an individual can't sell to these investors. What it's saying is that the federal government can't sell to the people. So I don't think that that's necessarily bad in regards to what they're doing. And then they have additional measures to combat speculations in single-family housing markets for large institutional investors. So they want to review the rules and guidance that relate to the large investors acquiring and holding single-family homes and consider revising them and that kind of stuff. So those are the kind of things that they're looking at. But really, it comes down to the things that the government owns. So it's not you as an individual owner that are necessarily affected by this. It is the government that is selling them, from my understanding in regards to that. And that makes sense. So they want to make sure that the first-time home buyer can buy a house, and that's the whole purpose of this, to try to do this. And so, and they're talking about that first-time buyers or individual homeowners would have the first right, like they have like an early look period. And that happened before too, that, like if FHA gets a home back in foreclosure, like I said, there were only 3 of the 300, so less than 1%. We had 360 some that were sold last week, and we had 3 foreclosures. And next week we probably won't have any. So basically, when it comes down to it, we don't have a huge amount that they would necessarily be taking back at this point in time. And if it is an FHA loan that got took over, and, HUD is selling it, the Department of Housing and Urban Development, then basically they do have a first look period that first time home buyers get the first dibs, and no investor, whether you're a big one or a little one or whatever, can bid on them. So basically, there are a lot of those things that are already in effect. And so it'll be interesting to see what happens down the pike, but that's kind of what's going on now. So in order to get in touch with us, you can call or text 407-566-2555. You can find us online at centralfloridarealestateradio.com, and we will see you next week. Have a great one, everybody. Bye-bye.